So in the previous class, we have seen how many ways we can create an object. So different ways of creating an object using type, using object, and using class, and multiple ways. So today we'll discuss more about class. And apart from that, we will also try to learn how to create a class and how we can define the read-only properties, optional properties, and also we'll try to understand the static variables and static methods within the class. Okay. So these are all related to class concept. So listen carefully, most important. So let's go and create a new folder for today's class. 14. Okay, so now I'm going to create a new file. Let's call it as a student.ts. And simple, I'm going to create a new class here. So first let's discuss some of the concepts here. So the first concept is how to create a class. And then we'll see read-only properties. So what is property? Property means a variable. Okay, so key and value pair. So property in the sense is key and value pair. So read-only property. So read-only properties are nothing but what? So we can assign data on that property only once. Okay, but we cannot modify the value of the property, which is called read-only properties. And then we have something called optional property. Optional property means even though if you're not able to, even though if you're not assigning the value to the property, that is accepted. That's called optional property. And also we can define static variables or static properties and methods. Static variables and methods. Okay, so these are the topics we are going to discuss today. Very simple, easy, just try to focus on it first. So let us create a new class. Okay, so how to create a class in TypeScript? Using class keyword. Class, and let me give a name to the class called student. So whenever you create a new class, the class name should start with the uppercase character. That is a standard. Okay, even if you give the lowercase character, it will work, but that's not the standard. So always try to create a class name with the uppercase character. So this is the class. So now what is a class contains? A class contains a properties and methods. Class contains a properties and methods. So let me create a few properties here. Let's say student ID, and which is basically a number. This is one property. And name, student name. To store student name, I'm creating another property which is called string, name string, student ID name. Then email, this is also a string property. And then school name. School name, this is also a string. So totally 4 properties I have created: student ID, name, email, and a school name. So here I will make some of the properties are read only, some of the properties are optional, some of the properties are static. For example, let's say student ID number. So this is one of the property or one of the variable of the class. So to make this property read only, what we can do is we can just use one keyword called read only. Before defining the property, we simply use one keyword called read only. This is a keyword. So when I use this keyword read only, then what will happen is this read only property, by using this read only property, we can assign the value to this variable only once. Only once we can assign the value, that too only through constructor. Only through constructor we can assign the value to this variable only once. We cannot reassign or we cannot modify the value. That is all about read only. We can capture the data, we can retrieve the data from the student ID, but at the time of assignment, it allows us to store the value only one time through the constructor. So that is the behavior of read only property. Okay. So this variable I'll making as a read only property by adding this particular keyword, read only keyword. So can only be assigned only once, and inside the constructor it is possible. And we can extract the value by using different methods, but we cannot modify the value. Okay, that is the behavior of read only property. So we can define one single variable or multiple variables also read only if you want. Okay, so I'm just showing you only one property or variable as a read only. Similarly, let's say name. So this is a normal regular property. We are not assigning anything, so which is normally called as a regular property. How we will define like this. So for this, we can assign the data using constructor or method, or we can retrieve the value. We can change the value many times. So all possibilities are there for normal regular property. And other one is email string. Suppose I want to make this property as an optional property. Optional property means what? Even though we don't specify the value, or even though we have not assigned the value to this variable or property, still it's fine. It will accept. Okay, that's called optional property. So how we can make it optional property? By adding this key after the key, just specify the question mark. This is called optional property. So as soon as you put the question mark, that becomes the optional property. So we have seen this notation in functions concept. In the function, we have an optional parameters, right? So in those cases, we have used this question mark. Same thing here also. When I make the property as an optional, we have to specify with the question mark after variable name, after property name. This is called optional property. So even though we have not assigned any value to this variable or property, still it is accepted. So this can be undefined. If I don't specify any value to the variable, what is the default value of that variable? Undefined. Okay, so this particular variable is what? Optional property. When I say question mark, this becomes the optional property. It can be undefined, means we, even though if you don't specify any value, or if we don't assign any value to the variable, still it is fine. By default assigned undefined. Okay, so this is read only, means this value we can assign only one time. Okay, we cannot change the value. That is the meaning of read only. So read, write, these are all different permissions. Okay, so read only means what? We can read the data from the variable, but we cannot reassign the data to the variable. Only once we can assign the data to the variable through the constructor. Okay, once I assign the data, we will able to read the data in number of times, but we cannot change the value. Okay, and we cannot modify the value. So that is the meaning of read only. Okay, so these are the different properties. So static I will show you later. So read-only property I have defined, normal regular property I have defined, optional property defined, and then school name is also normal regular property. Okay. Now, so I defined some of the properties. So what is the next thing? What is the class contains other than the properties? What is the class contains? Methods, constructors, and methods. Okay. So to initialize the data to the variables, which one we will use, constructor or method? Which one we will prefer? Constructor will be preferred to assign the data to the class variables. So let me create a constructor now. So I can create one constructor here. How to create a constructor in TypeScript? In the last class I told you, using constructor keyword. Okay. So in other programming languages, constructor name should be same as a class name. But here this thing is different. Okay. The constructor will be created using constructor keyword. So I say constructor, and we have to pass parameters, and here inside the constructor we assign the data. Now, so in the constructor we need to pass the parameters. So how we can pass? What are the properties we have defined? Totally 4 properties we have defined. Now constructor, first property is what? ID. And what's the type? Is number, comma. The second one is name. Name is what? A string. Third one is email. The property is what? A string. So 3 parameters I'm taking. School I'm not taking. I will use this variable later. Okay, so for now, just forget about this. So for now, I'm taking only 3 variables. Just understand this. In the constructor, what is the purpose of creating the constructor? To assign the data into the properties. To assign the data into the properties. Now here we are receiving the data inside the constructor. Now we need to assign this ID to the student ID. So this is a read-only property. So we can assign the data into student ID only once. So how we can assign this number to the student ID? How we can assign the ID to the student ID? So how we can represent the class variable using this keyword? So this dot student ID equal to ID. This dot name is equal to name. This dot email is equal to email, right? So this is how we can assign the data. Now observe carefully. Here, okay, read-only property. Student ID is a read-only property. So here we are getting the student ID, or we can say SID. Okay, if you are confusing. So SID we are storing into student ID. Name we are storing into, we can make it as a S name. Okay, so S name we are storing into name of the student, and email we are storing into student email. So I'm taking 3 parameters and storing it 3. Now if I look at this, email is an optional property. But according to the constructor definition, so we need to pass email ID here mandatory, right? Because here we are not saying it is mandatory, it is optional. But at the time of declaring the property, we are saying this is an optional. But at the time of receiving the value, we are not saying it is an optional. So at the time of receiving the value, also we need to specify it is an optional. How we can specify this variable is an optional? In the method or constructor or anywhere using question mark. Okay, so when you say question mark, this particular value or the parameter is optional. Even though if you don't pass this parameter, still it works. Okay, by default it will assign undefined. If I don't pass this email parameter, what will be the default value of email? It is undefined. Okay, so this is how we can create a constructor. So if I don't pass this email, this could be undefined. So if you don't pass email, then it is undefined. Okay, so now we created a constructor by initializing the data into the properties. Okay, apart from this constructor, I will also create an instance method. Means a method. So class contains the properties, constructor along with methods. The class contains the methods also. So let me create a method here. So constructor is created for assigning the data or initializing the data in the properties. Now I'm going to create a method which will display the data of the student. So for that, I'm creating a method. So how to create a method? Simple. I say display info. So can we make them read only student ID dot number? We already make them is read only here. Okay, so here we no need to specify again. So read only, we specify keyword only once here. So the constructor will take this ID read only SID and assign the value. Okay, so we cannot modify this value. So normally if it's a regular property, we can modify this value at any time, right? By using the class, we can create an object. Through object, we can access the variable and we can modify the value a number of times. But read only won't accept that. So read only allows the value only one time we can assign and we cannot modify, but we can retrieve the value from the variable multiple times. That is a major difference. But in the constructor, we will take this parameter as usual. We no need to specify any keyword here, but only at the time of declaration, we have to specify the read only property. Okay. So if you want to make other variables read only, you can make it. But here I want to show you multiple things. Read only property I want to show you, option property also I want to show you. So in the one single class, I have defined some of them are read only, some of them are optional. Okay. So read only is relevant to final keyword for variable. But don't compare with the Java. Okay. So the concept is little different in Java. So this is completely totally different. Okay. Yeah, so now display info. So what this method will do, this method will try to print the data of the properties. Okay, so let me just write a simple code. So display info method will return nothing. So if I specify the void, you can specify it, or else this is an optional. Okay, so let us try to implement this display info method. So first let me print console.log of student ID. So I'm using backlight operator. Okay, so or else we can just use double or single quote. Okay, student ID. And here, how to access the ID from the class? Again, same this keyword. By using this keyword, we can access all the properties from the same class we are accessing. So this dot student ID. Okay, so we're able to access this. Similarly, I will try to access other thing, student ID. After that, what we have a student name. So student name. So this dot name. This is our student name. Okay, so now this is important. So email ID is optional, right? So here I'm just printing email ID console.log of student or email. Okay, so this dot email. Just observe this carefully. So here I'm passing, I'm also printing email ID along with the student ID and the name. Okay. Suppose if you don't pass the value of email ID, because email ID is what? An optional parameter here, right? So if you don't pass email ID, what this is going to print? It is obviously print undefined. Okay. So before printing this email ID, I will check whether it is undefined or not. If it is undefined, I don't want to print email. Okay. I just print only email ID not provided. But if it is not undefined, then I will print the email ID. Okay. So for that, what I will do, I will put a slight condition here. Simple condition I will keep. If this dot email contains certain value. Okay. If this dot email and then, so what I will do, if this dot email, if the email is value is equal to, if this dot email is representing what? If you are passing some value, so if contains some value here. If not passing the value, it will be obviously undefined. Okay. So if this dot email contains certain value, now the condition becomes true. So then I will print email address. Okay. Else, suppose if the email value doesn't have, so suppose email value doesn't have anything, or if it is undefined, so then what I will print, I can say console.log of the email is not provided. I just print some message like this. Okay, this condition is applicable only for email address. Even if you don't write the condition, still that is fine. You can directly write a email address, but if you don't provide email address, it will just print undefined. So to avoid this, I'm keeping some condition. If the value, if the email contains certain value, then it will print the email address. If it doesn't have any value, then it will simply print email not provided. Okay. So this is how we can simply print the values from the class. So all the values we have assigned now: student ID, student name, and also email address. Okay. So this is the function actually. So this is the named function I have given. So this is the named function because I have given some name to this, or we can say method. Okay. Even if you put function keyword, that is an anonymous function. If I don't put any function keyword, then this is the named function. So you need to understand that. Okay. So I will use a different type of methods in different situations. Okay, you can use arrow function, anonymous function, named function, whichever way you want, you can use it. You understood my point? So what is this actually? This is a named function I'm using. This is a named function I'm using. Or if you want to make it as a anonymous function, so anonymous method, then how we can do it? How we can make this as an anonymous function? What is the syntax? The body won't change. Body is exactly same. Only the declaration will change. So if you want to make it as an anonymous function, you should define a variable first. So display info becomes a variable. Function is a keyword and return type is not needed. Okay, so you need to create like this. Okay. This is also not needed, I think. This is how we need to create a normal function. Okay, so here display info. So this is the named function I'm creating. So display info is a function. In this case, you don't need this function keyword. And colon. Return type you can specify, or else you can say void. So this is how we can create a method. Okay. So now you can just explore it. You can just convert this into arrow function, or you can convert this into named function. anonymous function. So whichever you want, you can create, right? So this is how we can create a class. Okay, in the class contains a multiple properties. One is read-only properties, one is regular property, another one is optional property. And we have created one constructor to assign the data into the properties, and also have created one method which will display the data of the properties. Okay, so now the class is got closed here. So we have closed this class here. Okay, now, so how to use this class? So what is the purpose of creating the class? Why you have created the class? To create an object. So to create an object, we need a class, right? So how many objects we can create for this class? How many objects we can create for this class, student class? N number of class, n number of objects we can create. So every object is independent. Okay, every object is independent. So whenever you create an object, that will acquire all the properties and methods from the class itself. And even though the objects are derived from the same class, the objects are independent. Okay, so let me create an object for student to class. So I'm creating the object usage of the class. So let me create a object for the student class. So the first object I'm creating, let's say let s1. How to create an object for the class? Using new keyword. S1 is equal to new student of, and how many parameters we can pass here? Because at the time of object creation itself, the constructor will automatically invoke. We no need to call the constructor. So basically here we are invoking the constructor. So how many parameters the constructor is expecting here? 3 parameters. Again, email is an optional parameter, right? So in the first object, I'm just passing only student ID and the name of the student. Okay, only 2 parameters because third one is optional. Okay, so after that, so with this, the constructor is invoked automatically and the student ID is assigned. Student name is also assigned. Email is optional, so I'm not passing the email ID. Okay. Similarly, I will create another object. Let's say S2 and a new student. So 102 is a student ID. Name is equal to, let's say, Kennedy. And also I can pass email ID. Let's say Bob. And also this time I will pass email ID. Let's say bob@gmail.com. Okay. Because email ID is optional. So in the first object, I'm not passing email ID, but then the second object, I'm passing the email ID. So now we need to extract the data from object S1 and S2. So how to extract the data? By calling the display method, display info method. So let us call it. So I want to display student info. So to display student info, first S1 object. I'm calling from S1 object, S1 dot display info. S1 dot display info. So display info, is it returning any output for us? It won't return anything. It's just printing the data. Now, when I say display info, because we are passing only 2 parameters, it will just display only 2 parameters, 2 values, student ID and the name, but email ID is not provided. Okay. So just execute this code. So day 14 slash student dot ts. Okay. Sorry. tsx day 14 slash student dot ts. Okay, so now we can see we got 3 details. So student ID is displayed, name is displayed, and email is not provided. So this is the information from which object? First object. S1 is the first object. Now similarly, let us extract the data from the second object, S2 dot display info. Now this method will extract the data from the second object, S2 object. Perfect. So this is the student ID 102, name is Bob, email address is got printed. Okay. So similarly, we can create n number of objects and we can pass the data through the objects and we can capture the data from those particular objects. Okay. This is the way we can do it. Okay. So we can say read only property. So read-only property means what? We can just assign the data only once inside the constructor. So if you want to modify this, it is not possible. Okay. So let me try to modify this. How to access the property directly from the class? Can we access the property directly from the class? No, because through object only we can access, right? Only through object we can access the variables and methods and everything. So how we have access the display info method? Similar way. The previous class, we have discussed this. So whenever you create a class, let's say this is my class. Class contains some variables or methods. Let's say I have some X is a variable. I have a one method called m1. Now when I create an object, this is first object and this is another object. Okay, whenever you create an object, this object 1 and object 2. Now object 1 contains the same variable, object contains the same method, because this will acquire their own copy of the variables or method from the class itself. So object 2 is also having their own X, their own method. Okay. So through the objects only we can access. Suppose when I say obj1.x, what does it mean? We are trying to access the variable from the object 1. Similarly, obj2.x means we are accessing the variable from the object 2. Okay. So the variables or methods are belongs to respective objects. So once you create an object, we never touch the class. So only through objects we can work. Okay. So now when I say x is equal to read only, what is read only means? We can assign the data only once. So in the class itself, we are passing the data to the m1 and then we assign some data to the x. So let us try to modify this. Suppose if we want to access the property directly from the object, can we access it or not? Yes. Similarly, object 2x also we can access. Similarly, here I'm trying to access the read-only property, which is student ID, and then I want to change it. Just observe this carefully. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to access this S1 display info. This is going to print all the information like 101 and John is got printed. So which one is a read-only property? Student ID is a read-only property. Okay. So this is before changing. Display student info before, or you can like this, you can just print. Now what I will do is I will try to modify the student ID. Okay, so how we can access the student ID? Using object. So not from the student. So once you create a class, okay, so we can't access, this is just a structure. With this class, we need to create an object. So we already created an object. Only through object we can modify. Just observe this. Try to modify. Okay, try to modify the SID of S1 object. Just observe carefully. So modify the SID is what? SID is a read-only property, right? SID, student ID is a read-only property. I'm just showing the behavior, just observe. So try to modify the student ID of S1 objects. So can we modify this? Because this is a read-only property. So we have already assigned through the constructor. So once you assign to the constructor, so we cannot modify the value. So let us try to modify. So from S1 object, I'm trying to access student ID. And then I'm going to change this. Let's say 111. See, it is giving an error. So what is an error it is giving? Cannot assign to student ID because it is a read-only property. Cannot assign student ID because it is read-only property. So this is a error we will get. Okay, now you understand what is a read-only property. But regular properties, other properties, we can modify it directly. We can modify them. But a student ID, we cannot modify. We can retrieve the value. We can assign the value only once, but we cannot modify it. So this is the problem. So we cannot modify read-only property. Okay, so this is the one scenario you need to understand how exactly read-only properties work. So everyone is clear so far about read-only property, only read-only property. So when I create a read-only property inside the class, we can assign the value using constructor only once. Okay, but we cannot reassign, we cannot modify the read-only property. So that is the meaning of read-only. Okay. So these properties are applicable only for the variables or property. That's the reason specifically I'm saying read only properties. I'm not saying read only class. Okay, this is a read only property, optional property. So I'm clearly specifically saying property means these are applicable only for the properties. And there is another keyword called static that is applicable for properties and also methods. Okay, a static keyword is applicable for the properties and methods. I'll discuss that. Okay, so this is all about read only property. So everything is understood, right? So two things, read only property and optional property also we have understood. So optional property in the sense what? At the time of passing the data, we can ignore the value or we can no need to pass the value. So that is optional. Okay, so we have handled two things here. One is read-only properties. We have seen how exactly read-only properties work, and also we have seen how exactly optional property works. Okay, clear so far? These are the two things: read-only properties, optional properties. So read-only property means only at the time of creating the property we just specify read-only. But if it's an optional property, we should say question mark at the time of creating the property, and also at the time of assigning the value or at the time of taking the parameters inside the constructor, we should also specify the question mark here. And then only this particular parameter becomes an optional, otherwise no. Okay. So this is an example for read-only properties and optional property. Now let us understand about static variables or properties. You can call them as a variables or properties. Okay. So now the static keyword is applicable for both the properties and methods. Static keyword is applicable for both the properties and methods. Okay, so let us understand something about static. So when to go for static and what's the use of static keyword? Whenever you want to make a variable as a static or a property as a static, let's say I'm enabling school name also now. So this is a regular property. So I want to make it as a static property. To make it as a static property, I can use a static keyword in front of the property like this. Now this particular variable becomes a static variable or static property. So what is the meaning of the static? What's the behavior of the static? Suppose if you don't specify the static, these properties are belongs to different objects. Just listen, this is a critical concept. Just understand this. As I said, an example. Let's say, again, I have one class. For this class, I created one object 1 and object 2 and object 3. So a class contains a number of properties and methods, and object 1 is acquired their own properties and methods. Again, object 2 is also acquired their own properties and their own methods. Similarly, object 3 is also acquired their own properties and their own methods. So now do we have any connection between these objects? Object 1, 2, 3? No, they are independent. The objects are independent. There is no connection between objects once they created. Okay. And whatever properties are there in object 1 and object 2, they are also different. Right? Here object 1 SID can be different. Here SID value can be different. Here SID value can be different. Right? The properties and methods are different copies are available for in different objects. So here if I SID is 101, here SID is 102, here SID is 103. Suppose if I modify the value here, that won't impact the other SIDs of other objects. If I modify the SID of object 3, that won't impact the object 2 and object 1. Why? Because they are independent. There is no connection between the objects or there is no relation between the objects. Okay. But sometimes if there is any common property or if there is any common method across multiple objects, let's say here, let me take a school name, for example. Right, all the objects, all the students are having or belongs to same school name. So in that case, that variable or that property becomes a common property across multiple objects. Okay, so here the object 1, the school name is same, object 2, school name is same, object 3 also school name is same. So in that particular case, we can make this property as static. So as soon as we make this property as a static, then what will happen? This property becomes a shared property or a common property of objects. So all objects will able to share the same variable or same property. It is not belongs to specific object now. As soon as we make that property as a static, that property is not at all belongs to specific object. It belongs to all the objects. So we can modify this property using object 1, or we can modify this using object 2, or we can modify this by using object 3. And whichever object you use, wherever you modify this, that will reflect in all objects. Because this is the shared property or shared variable or common property across multiple objects. Okay, this is a concept of static. Static is nothing but what? That variable is a shared property or shared variable across multiple objects. Okay, so if it is a shared, what does it mean? We can access the variable directly from the class itself, directly from the objects, or we can modify the property either by any of the objects, or we can modify this either by using class itself. Okay, the another facility here is normally how we can access the properties using objects. But if it is static, we can directly access using class name itself. We don't need an object name to access the static property. We can directly access by using name itself because this is a shared across everything. Okay, so that is a usage of static keyword. So not only properties, we can make methods also static. Let me make it as a static. Now school name is common for all the objects. So in that case, what I can make this making as a static. So whenever you make this as a static, I default value, I'm giving something here. Okay, by default, I'm giving some value. Let's say Greenwood High School, something like this. Okay, I'm just giving some default value to the school name. So this is common across all the objects. So this value is same across all the objects. Now this becomes a static property or static variable. So when I make it as a static variable, this becomes common. Static variable or static property shared among all instances. Instance is nothing but an object. Okay, you can call it as an object or instance. So this particular property or variable belongs to all the objects or shared between all the objects. Okay, so in that case, we no need to assign this value separately using constructor. So by default, we have assigned some data. So now let us see how to access this static variable across multiple objects. Okay, so along with that, what I will do is I will also create one static method. So this is our static variable. So I will also create another method, which is a static method. Okay, suppose if you want to change the school name, can we change it or not? We can change it. This is not the final value. Okay, this is not a read only. We can change the value by using any of the object because this is a shared variable, shared property across multiple objects. So to change the value of the school name, I will try to create one more method here. One more method. Let's say change school name. Right. So return void. And this method will take one parameter, school name as a parameter. I'm just giving some variable called new name, which is a string parameter. Right. So inside this, whatever the value we are getting here, the same value I will assign to the school name. Okay. So how to access the school name here? Static school name. This dot school name equal to the new name. Whatever the new name we are capturing, that we specify. Now just observe carefully. So previously, when I implementing display method, we are able to access the variables using this dot email or this dot student ID, this dot name, this dot email. So by using this keyword, we are able to access. But here, when I try to access this keyword, it's giving an error. Why? Property school name does not exist on type student. Did you mean to access a static member student or school name instead? Remember, whenever I use this keyword, this is basically representing the class, only class. But the school name, whatever we created, this is belongs to objects also. Not only class, this is belongs to objects also. So in that case, we cannot access this using this keyword. Okay. So what we need to do now, we need to use directly from the class itself, we can access. So static properties, we can directly access from the class itself. Remember that. Student dot school name. So now I have created another method which will change the value of the school name. What is the default value we have given? Something like this. Now, if you want to change the value of the school, I can call this method. Okay, change the school name. Now, again, I want to make this method as a static method. First, listen, I will clarify all the questions later. Okay. So static keyword is applicable for both the properties and the methods. Both the properties and methods. So I make one property as a static, and also I make one method as a static. So I have one static method, one property as a static. So in front of the method, if you put static keyword, that method becomes a static method. Okay. So a few important things you need to understand here. Static methods and static properties. This is a little different. The first point. Static properties or methods are common across all the objects. It is common or shared, called as shared, all the objects. There's the first point. Second point. Second point. Static properties or methods can be accessed through class name directly. Okay, so static properties and methods can be accessed through class name directly. So we don't need an object. Third point. Static properties or methods can be modified using any object. Okay, so if we modify them by using one single object, that will automatically reflect in other objects. Why? Because that is a common for all the objects. It is a shared method or shared property for all the objects. Okay, so these are the three important points you need to remember. Static properties or methods are common across all the objects. Static properties or method can be accessed through class name directly. Static properties and methods can be modified using any object. You can modify with any object that will impact other objects also, because there's a common variable. Okay, if you change in one place, that will reflect in all other objects. Same thing I have done here. So in the class student, we created one static property and we created one static method. And static method will change the value of the school name. Okay. Now, how to access the static variable and static method? Now come back here. So here S1 object we created, S2 object is also created. Now S1, S2 contains the static property and static method both, right? Now let us try to access, let us try to change the value of the static variable. So display info. So what I'll do is I will call this to display info method, right? So what I will do is I will try to change the school name. So change the school name using static method, because we have created one static method for changing the school name. Okay, so how to change it? Okay, so here I will write how to change the school name. So how we need to access this method. How to call the static method? How to call the static method? How to invoke the static method? Using class name directly we can access. So what I will do is class name is what? Student dot change school name. Change school name. So here I'm changing some different name. Let's say Sunrise Academy. That's it. So by calling this method, what will happen? The value will be changed here. Okay, that is again reflected in all other objects. Okay, so we have changed this value. So after changing, just observe carefully. By using S1, I'm calling how we can capture how we will know whether it's changed or not. Okay, what I'll do is I will also this time In the display info method, we just printed only email address and student ID name, right? So apart from this, I will also try to print console.log of school name. School name I am trying to print. So here, school name is what? This is our school name. Okay. So how to access school name here? School name. Can we use this keyword? Can we use this keyword for static variables or static methods? Can we use this keyword? No, we cannot. This keyword we cannot use. Okay, we can use only class name. We can access static method, static variable only through class name. So student or school name. So access static property using student, that is class name itself. I'm writing the comments later, you guys can read clearly. Okay, so we can access student ID using this keyword, name is also this keyword, email also by using this keyword. But school name we cannot access using this keyword. Why? Because student ID, name, email addresses belongs to specific object, but school name is belongs to all the objects, not specific. So we cannot use this keyword. Okay, so when I call display info, this will again print the school name also. Okay, now just observe carefully. So here, before calling the school, before applying this method, I'm just calling display info methods. So let's see what this will print. You can see by default, this is the value we have for the school. And if I look at the output also, what's the school name for the first object? Greenwood High. What's the school name of the second object? Same, Greenwood High, because there's a common variable. That is a common variable across multiple objects. So now what I will do is, I will try to change this. Student dot change school name, Sunrise Academy, I'm passing. After passing this, again, I will try to print the student info. Just observe from S1 and S2. Okay, so display student info, console.log, displaying student info after changing school name. Okay, so again, I'm calling S1 and S2. So before changing the school, what are the values of the school from object 1, object 2? Greenwood High. Now here I have changed the school name. And after that, what you are expecting? For both objects, it should be the same school name. So when I execute it, just observe carefully. Initially, the first object, if I look at this, first object school name is Green High. Second object name is or school name is also Greenwood High. Now, after changing the school name, we can see that Sunrise Academy and Sunrise Academy. For both the objects, the values got changed. Okay, so this is how we can access static properties and static methods. 3 important points only you need to remember. Static properties or methods are common or shared across all objects. Static properties or methods can be accessed through class name directly. Static properties and methods can be modified using an object. Okay, so with this method, we are able to modify it. We just created another static method. We have passed the value that is changed. And after that, it is every object is got impacted. So we have printed the data from S1 and also S2. So this is how we can use static. Everybody has understood? Read-only properties, option property, static properties and methods. So static is applicable for both the properties and the methods. So properties and methods are common across multiple objects if it is a static. So if it is a read-only, we have to use read-only keyword. And if it is an optional property, then we have to use question mark. If it is a static property, then you can use static keyword. If it is a static method, then in front of the method, you can just specify the static. Understood, everyone? Please confirm in the chat box. So these are all about different things which we can use inside the class itself. So how can we modify using the object? How to access through the object? Can we access this method? Can we access this through the object or not? School name, can we access this through object? So through the class, we are able to access. Through the class, we are able to access. Can we access through the object? Let's say S1 dot. Can we access like this? School name. Here, I say XYZ. S1 dot school name. See, it is giving some error. Property school name does not exist on type student. Did you mean to access the static member student or school name instead? So even directly through object, we cannot access in TypeScript. In Java, it is possible, but here it is not possible. Only through class name, we can modify this value. Only through class name. Okay, so through the object name, we cannot access. Okay, so this is the one thing. Even let's say S1 dot change school name. Even this is also not able to access. So even it is a static method or it can be static property or variable, we cannot directly access from anywhere. Only through class name we can access. But still they are belongs to objects. Okay, this is common across all the objects. In Java, behavior is a little bit different. In Java, we can access the static variable again by using objects also. Okay, but here we cannot access through object. We can directly access only from the class. That is a slight change in Java and TypeScript. Okay. So these are the 3 points. So can be accessed or you can be modified using not an object actually. It is a class. But in Java, it is possible through object also. But here the behavior is a little bit different. So static properties and methods are common across all the objects. And static methods and methods can be accessed through class name directly. Proper methods can be modified using class itself. Okay. We should not use this keyword. We cannot use this keyword to access the static keyword. So that is another point. We cannot use this for static properties or variable. So instead, we can use class. All right, so clear. All 4 points I've shown you practically. So this is all about read-only properties, optional property, and static properties. Okay. So now let us move on to another topic, which is also belongs to the class. So what is the class contains? Class contains the properties. Class contains a constructor. Class contains the methods. So we can also achieve the constructor overloading and method overloading concept inside the class. So TypeScript will support method overloading and also constructor overloading. So in the last classes, we have seen function overloading. So do you remember the concept function overloading? What is function overloading? We have multiple functions having same kind of a signature. So different kind of a signatures, but there will be one implementation. That's called function overloading, right? So we have a different function signatures, different parameters, different types, but function name is same. But all the functions we will implement using single implementation, single function implementation. That implementation should match with all other signatures. That's called function overloading. Same thing is applicable in classes also. In the classes, we call them as a method overloading. We can have multiple signatures of methods, but we have only one single implementation which will match with all the signatures. That's called method overloading. Same thing is applicable for constructor overloading. So we can have multiple constructors with multiple signatures, but there will be one implementation of constructor that is matching with all other signatures. So let us see how we can achieve the overloading concept within the class. So let's go and create another file. It is not exactly Java. So Java overloading is totally different. So here TypeScript is provided the different approach. Overloading.ts. Okay. So what is method overloading, constructor overloading? We can have multiple signature, but there will be one common implementation. There will be multiple method signatures, but there will be one common implementation, that is method overloading. Similarly, constructor can have different signatures, but there will be only one implementation of constructor, that is called constructor overloading. Okay, so what is the meaning of this particular overloading? We understood this. Now let us try to implement this. So for implementation, I'm creating a new class. Let's say calculator. Calculator is my class. So first let us start with the constructor overloading. Then I'll discuss method overloading. Okay. So what is constructor overloading? We will have a multiple signatures of constructor and there will be one common implementation that should be matched with the other signatures. Example, constructor. So how to create a constructor using constructor keyword. So this is one signature. We don't have any parameters in this. We're not passing any parameters. Constructor obviously will never return any value. This is just a signature of the default constructor. If I don't pass any parameters, anything which is called as a default constructor. This is default constructor. Now I'll create another constructor with a different signature. Let's say constructor. And this time I'm taking two parameters, A, which is a number, B, which is also number. So this is another signature. So how many constructors are there in the class? Two constructors. So first one is a default constructor. If any constructor is taking parameters, we call it as a parameterized constructor. Parameterized constructor. Okay, two signatures are there for constructor. So now we need to implement only one that should match with both the constructors. That implementation should match with both the constructors, should satisfy the both the signatures. So we need to implement like that. So how we can implement? Let me implement this. Constructor. So now you have to tell me this. First constructor is not taking any parameters, but second constructor is taking two parameters. Now this constructor, whatever parameters I've defined here, should match with the first one and second one. So how we can create them? Yes, both the parameters should be optional. Then only the signature, both the signatures will match. Now let us make A as an optional parameter. How we can make the parameters an optional? By using question mark. This is a number, comma, B, question mark. This is also a number. Right? So now if I look at this implementation, this is exactly matching with the first one or not? Yes. Even though if you don't pass these two parameters, first constructor will be matched. If I pass two parameters, then second constructor will be matched. Okay. So now the parameter wise, both the constructor signatures are matching. Now implementation wise. So before implementation of this constructor, basically I will verify. So these values are having certain data or they are undefined. Okay. So if they are undefined, then I cannot perform any operations. Undefined means what? There are no values in it. If I don't pass any parameters, I cannot perform any operations. But if I pass some values, then I can do some operations. So when to do the operation? If those values are not undefined, if A and B are not undefined, then I can do some operations. So I will put some condition here. If A not equal to undefined and B is also should be undefined. B not equal to undefined. So then I will perform certain operation. So what operation I will do? I will just print console.log of sum of A and B. So I'm just adding these two numbers. So here I can say A plus B. And this is an expression. So let us keep this inside the bracket. Like this. Okay. So when I will perform this operation, if both are undefined, both are not undefined, then I will perform. But if they are undefined, so then what I'll do? If they are undefined, so I cannot perform any operation. So in that case, what will happen? Console.log. What will happen? You tell me. If I don't pass any values here, so if I pass the values here, then which signature will be matched? The second constructor signature will be matched. So parameterized constructor will be taken care. Suppose if I don't pass any values, then which constructor will be invoked? The first one will match. That is a default constructor. So in the else block, I'm just simply writing default constructor called like this. Okay. So now if I look at the implementation, which is exactly matching with both the signatures or not? Yes. So this is called constructor overloading. Constructor overloading means you can have multiple signatures of constructors, but the implementation should match with both the constructors. So if I pass parameters, second constructor will be invoked. If I don't pass any parameters, the first constructor will be invoked. So it won't do anything actually. So I'm just printing the else block. So this is how we can achieve the constructor overloading. So let me write it the point. Constructor overloading. Okay, constructor overloading. Perfect. So now let us go and create an object. So when this constructor will be invoked? When the constructors will be invoked at the time of object creation. So whenever you create an object of the calculator class, the constructor will automatically invoked. So now let us see that usage. So we created the class contains the constructors. So let us use the class using an object. So let's create an object for calculator class. Calculator calc1 equal to new calculator. Okay, now here I'm not passing any parameter. Sorry. Let. Okay. So we are not passing any parameter here. What will be the output? Which constructor will be executed? This will be invoked, the first constructor, which is default constructor. But implementation, this will be executed. But internally, because we don't pass any parameters, so this won't be executed. Only else block will be executed. So that is default constructor will be executed. Let me run this code. So here I say calculator dot ts. Sorry, overloading, right? Overloading dot ts. Perfect. You can see default constructor is got called because we haven't passed any parameters. Now let me create another object. Let cal2 equal to new calculator 10 comma 20 I'm passing. Two parameters I'm passing. So execute one more time. Now we can see sum of a and b is 30 is got printed. So whichever constructor you have invoked, same implementation is got executed. Okay, so this is called constructor overloading, which is called as a constructor overloading. So we can create multiple constructors, but we should have only one single implementation. And according to the values, it will invoke the respective constructors. Okay. Similarly, we can also achieve the method overloading. Constructor overloading is done. So now method overloading. So what is method overloading? Same concept. We can have multiple signatures of the method, but there is only one implementation of the method, which will match with other signatures. Now, like the constructors, I will also create some more methods. Okay, this is constructors implementation, right? So you can create after the constructor or here you can create. So let me create signatures of methods. Or let me create here inside the class itself. So this part is constructor overloading. So now I'll show you method overloading. Method overloading. Okay. So in the method overloading, exactly same as function overloading. In the last classes we have seen. So multiple signatures having one single implementation. All right. So let me create a method called add. So this will take two parameters. Let's say number, comma b is also number. Two param and return type is also number. This is one signature. Add a is a number, b is a number, return type is also number. This is the signature of the method. I'll create another method with a different signature. Add a, b, and this time I will also add c, which is also number, and return type is also number. Okay. Now I have two different signatures. Now I need to write one implementation for both the signatures. And that implementation should match with both the methods. Okay. So how we can implement? Implementation. Add. So yeah, now tell me how we can define the parameters that should match with both the signatures. So first method is having only two parameters. Second method having three parameters. Now whatever parameters we define here should match with both the methods. Yes, first two are mandatory, right, in both the methods. So third parameter will come only in the second one. So we'll make third one is a optional. So how we can make it happen? I can say a, which is a number. This is mandatory for both the functions. So I say number. B is also number. This is also mandatory for both the methods. But C is an optional. In the first method, it is an option. First method, we don't have a C, but second method, we have a C. We can make it as an optional now. Comma, C question mark. And this is also a number. Right? So return type is again number. So now you can see the declaration is exactly matching with both the signatures. The declaration is matching with both the signatures. Now even implementation should match. Okay, so what I'll do is, if I pass 3 parameters, then the second method should execute. When I pass only first 2 parameters, then the first method should execute. So like that, we need to write a function. We need to implement the method. So before implementation of this, we will verify whether C is having some value or not. If C is having some value, then I will perform something. If C is undefined, then I will perform something else. So when I can do A plus B plus C, 3 values when I can add. If C is also having certain value, then I can do A plus B plus C. That means all 3 values should not be undefined. All 3 parameters should not be undefined. Then only I can perform addition of 3 numbers. So I can put one condition here. If C not equal to undefined. If C is equal to C not equal to undefined means what? A and B, anyway, we have some values. We must pass some parameters into A and B. We no need to verify them. But C, we need to verify whether C is undefined or not. If it is undefined, means if it is not undefined, negative condition. If it is C undefined, not undefined means what? C contains certain value. That means A, B, C is also having some values. So here I will return A plus B plus C, because return type is there. For the method, return type is there. So I'm returning A plus B plus C. Okay. If C is undefined, if C is not undefined, then I say A plus B plus C. Okay. For example, C is undefined. C is undefined. That means what? A and B should be used. So simply I can return A plus B. That's it. Either this one. If it is not executed, then A plus B will be executed. A plus B always will be executed. But if C is not equal to undefined, then A plus B plus C is also have added. But if C is undefined, then we are not adding C. We just return A plus B. This is the implementation of both the signatures. Now we can see this function, this method implementation is matching with both the signatures. This is called method overloading. Just like a function overloading, here inside the class, we call it as a method overloading. Okay. So now let us use this same class. So we already created 2 objects. For these 2 will execute constructor overloading, right? So now let us try method overloading. So cal1, we already created an object. Okay. So what I can do, I can say this is example for constructor overloading. We are just passing the values into constructor. So this time we will see method overloading. So in constructor overloading, constructor will automatically invoke at the time of object creation. But methods are not like that. So methods, we have to explicitly call them using an object, right? So let's use this cal1 object. Cal1 dot add. Okay, now I'm not passing any parameters. So I can pass 2 parameters. So I said 10, 20 I'm passing. Okay, and it will return the output, right? So I'll print console.log of cal1.add1. So here we are adding 2 numbers. Adding 2 numbers. Okay, so similarly, I say console.log of adding 3 numbers. Adding 3 numbers and cal. This time I will call from another object. Let's say cal2 dot add 3 parameters 10, 20, 30 I'm passing. Understand the difference. Okay, so this method, when I pass 2 parameters, same implementation is executed, but the signature is matching with the first one. When I pass 3 parameters, again same implementation will be executed, but second method will be matching. Okay, so for 2 parameters and 3 parameters also, we are executing the same implementation. Okay, so execute. Yes, so this is, so when I say 10 comma 20, adding two numbers is 30. The first method is got executed. When I pass 3 parameters, 10 plus 20 plus 30, 60 is given, which is executed. Second method. This is called method overloading concept. So inside the class, it is possible. If I don't use class concept, if I don't use this, then that is a function overloading. Yes, you can use cal1 for both methods also, no problem. So you can say adding two numbers, cal1 dot add 10 comma 20 comma 30 you can use. So add two numbers, let's say from S1 object. Add two numbers from S1 object. Three numbers. Similarly, here add two numbers. Same thing and repeating here. So adding two numbers from S2, adding three numbers from S2 itself. So here we need to just call cal2 object, cal2 object. Same thing. Okay, so now you can see same output you are getting from S1 and also S2. So this is how we can achieve method overloading concept, constructor overloading and method overloading. Okay, so automation point of view, they are not important, but interview point of view, these are important. So don't compare with the Java. So in Java, overloading concept is a little bit different. And so in Java, we don't have read-only properties and all. But in TypeScript and JavaScript, we have these concepts. Okay, so do one round of practice. Try to understand the concept of class and objects. Be familiar with this. In the next class, we will discuss something about inheritance and the super keyword. And there are multiple things are there. So we'll discuss them in the next class. Okay, so just try to do 1 or 2 rounds of practice, and that is more than enough. If you understand the concept, that is enough. So what is read-only property? What is static property? What is the behavior of it? And how can I access the static properties and methods, optional properties, methods, constructors? Okay, so like that, you can do that. Okay, so we'll stop here for today's session. We will continue tomorrow.